Tonight, Local 10 News makes history. We are now the first local television station in the country with a news crew based in Cuba.
Local 10's Hatzel Vela has moved to Havana to cover Cuba from the inside. Hatzel's in Havana tonight with more on this historic one and only exclusive.
Nowadays, coming to Cuba is just a 50-minute commercial flight. That's the easy part. A journalist here working from South Florida and living here, well, that's years in the making. Local 10 News has been covering Cuba for decades. There was that Baltimore Orioles game.
First ball swinging.
Back in 1999. Pope John Paul paid a visit. 2 more popes followed. And even an American president. Libertad! Libertad! We marched with the ladies in white. We watched the flag go up at the American embassy. We were even granted exclusive access to be the first television station to cross the entire country. We brought you our Cuba Coast to Coast series in 2015. But each time we visited, there was a return ticket and an expiring visa. The Obama administration also this time, we are here to stay. Our new office, our new apartment, our daily ride to work. Photojournalist Brian Eli and I, the first journalist from a local television station in the United States, granted permission to move here. Years of talks and meetings with the Cuban government, and we are here, at least temporarily. WPOG management has been taking part in conversations with officials here in Havana and at the Cuban embassy in Washington for quite some time, with the hope that we could open up bureaus to have some permanent presence here in Havana. But I can tell you that this is all part of the new U.S.-Cuba restoration of relations, which includes Cuba allowing more U.S. journalists access to the island. Our move here is part of that experiment. I've covered stories in Cuba more than a dozen times. Not once has the government told us what we can and cannot do and who we can talk to. This time is no different. While it is not easy getting information and getting interviews, there are no restrictions on us. We can cover what we want to cover and talk to whoever we want to talk to. The Cuban government has only said, please be sure that the stories are fair. And so this great experiment begins. We certainly understand the opportunity and the responsibility.
The coverage from Cuba locally has been fairly good. Particularly you guys are new.
Retired professor and longtime Cuban expert Andy Gomez says coverage of Cuba has changed as the island itself changes.
As an academic, most of your reports are very valuable to me in developing my own theories as to how Cuba is transitioning.
He believes there's an atmosphere of greater access by the American press under a more pragmatic Raul Castro.
Raul needs to have Cuba portrayed very differently to the world, to the United States, to Miami, than Fidel did, in my opinion.
The more coverage there is of what happens in Cuba is good.
Orlando Gutierrez, who heads the Democratic Directorate and is highly critical of U.S.-Cuba relations, wants to see ethical, objective, and balanced reporting when it comes to Cuba. Gutierrez wants to see real life in Cuba, the struggles of the Cuban people, how they live and survive.
Neighborhoods where there's no running water, there's no electricity, but there are repressive neighborhood committees run by the Castro regime.
He wants more stories on political prisoners and dissidents who continue to play opposition to the Castro government.
Change is coming to Cuba. It's coming in the near future, and I think it's important for journalists to be there and be able to report on that change.
This is a historic move for us, and it is a historic time to be covering Cuba from the inside. First, the death of Fidel Castro, also Raul Castro saying he will leave power in 2018. What about the economic woes that the island is set to be facing? And then you have President-elect Donald Trump. Will he shut the door on everything that President Obama has done when it comes to Cuba? That remains to be seen. For now, reporting in Havana, Hatzel Vela, Local 10 News.